Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. It was still dark when Robert's alarm went off. He groaned and fumbled to hit the snooze button, but he knew he couldn't go back to sleep. Today was the day. The bet had seemed harmless at the time, but now that it was here, his stomach churned with anxiety. Robert dragged himself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water wake him up. As he washed, he thought back to how he'd gotten himself into this mess. It had started as a silly dare between friends, spurred on by one too many drinks at the bar. Robert was the CEO of a successful tech company, so his buddies had jokingly dared him to go undercover as an office worker for a day. At first, Robert had laughed it off, but the more they teased him, the more he felt his stubborn pride rear up. Before he knew it, he'd accepted the bet. He would pose as a new secretary and blend in among his own employees for a full day. Now, here he was, committed to this crazy scheme. Robert knew he couldn't back out now without losing face. Sighing, he turned off the shower and began the process of transforming into Roberta. First came the wig, a long chestnut brown one that framed his face femininely. He'd gotten it specially ordered online. Next was the makeup. Foundation to smooth out his skin, subtle eye makeup and blush to contour his face, and finally a shiny lip gloss. Looking in the mirror, Robert barely recognized himself already. The hardest part was getting into the clothes. He'd borrowed one of his wife's outfits, a knee-length skirt, silky blouse, and low heels. The underwear was even more foreign to him: bra, panties, stockings. As he adjusted the lacy bra, Robert couldn't help but feel ridiculous. But he had gone too far to quit now. Taking a deep breath, he assessed himself in the full-length mirror.
"Well, hello there, Roberta,"
he said, trying to disguise his voice higher. He burst out laughing at the absurdity of it all. This was going to be one hell of a day. The commute into work felt endless. Robert kept fidgeting, constantly afraid that someone would see through his disguise. But the wig, clothes, and makeup did their job. No one gave him a second glance. As Robert parked, his heart pounded in his chest. This was it. Time to test his acting skills. Chin up and shoulders back, he strutted into the lobby like he owned the place. Well, technically he did own the place, but today he was just an office newbie. He rode the elevator up to the top floor, where the executives and assistants worked. His office door was right across from his secretary, Linda's desk. Linda wasn't there yet, thankfully. Robert didn't need her recognizing him right off the bat. Settling himself at the spare desk intended for the imaginary new secretary, Roberta, Robert booted up the computer. He had to fight back a smile at the ridiculousness of it all. Here he was, CEO of this company, about to pretend to be an entry-level assistant. "Hi there!" a female voice said suddenly, making Robert jump. He looked up to see Linda standing there, coffees in hand. She set one on Robert's desk. "I'm Linda, one of the executive's assistants. You must be the new secretary."
"Yes, I'm Roberta,"
Robert replied, altering his voice. He accepted the coffee with a smile. "It's so nice to meet you," Linda said warmly. "How are you liking it here so far?"
"Everyone's been very welcoming,"
Robert said. He paused, realizing he'd have to pretend to not know anyone.
"I'm still learning my way around, though. It's a big company."
Linda laughed. "It sure is. I remember my first weeks here. It was like a maze." She leaned in like she was sharing a secret. "Even the executives get turned around sometimes. Don't tell anyone, though." Robert chuckled.
My lips are sealed.
He found himself enjoying the casual rapport with Linda. As CEO, he didn't get a chance to chat with the lower-level employees much. It was a nice change of pace. The workday rapidly became chaotic. Phones rang off the hook, executives barked orders for coffee and copies, meetings came and went. Robert found himself swept up in the madness, completely in his role as Roberta. He answered phones, took diligent notes in meetings, and fetched coffee orders. Whenever anyone asked who he was, he'd flash a smile and say, "I'm the new secretary, Roberta." So far, so good. The hardest part was when he had to talk to the other executives, who knew him as their boss. But thankfully, no one looked twice at the new secretary. She blended into the background like furniture. At one point, Robert was called into a meeting with the company's vice president, John. As John droned on about sales targets and quarterly reports, Robert had to resist the urge to chime in with his usual authoritative opinions. Instead, he sat quietly and took notes. John glanced at him occasionally when asking for a coffee refill, but didn't seem to see past the wig and makeup disguise. Near the end of the day, Robert was starting to feel comfortable in his role, like he could keep up the ruse. That is, until he ran into the head of HR, Debbie. Debbie gave him an odd look. "I'm sorry, have we met before? You look so familiar." Robert's adrenaline spiked, but he kept his cool. "I don't think so. I'm new here. I'm Roberta, the temporary secretary." Debbie frowned for a second more, then shook her head. "My mistake. You just remind me of someone." She trailed off, then smiled. "Well, welcome to the company, Roberta." After that uncomfortable interaction, Robert decided it was time to wrap things up. "Quit while you're ahead," he thought. As people began leaving for the day, Robert grabbed his purse and headed for the elevator. He had just stepped in when he heard Linda's voice. "Hold the elevator, please!" Linda squeezed in beside him. "Phew, what a day!" she remarked. "I'm ready for a girls' night out. What do you say, Roberta? Want to grab a drink?" Robert froze. Drinks after work with his secretary? That was crossing a line. But before he could respond, the elevator dinged at the ground floor. "I have plans tonight, sorry," Robert said hurriedly, bolting for the exit. "No problem. See you tomorrow, Roberta," Linda called after him cheerfully. Robert didn't relax until he was safely back in his car, wig and heels cast aside. As he drove home, he shook his head thinking about the crazy day. He had certainly learned a lesson in empathy. Maybe he would increase the secretary's pay. They earned it. Robert let out a sigh of relief as he pulled into his driveway. The first day of his secret identity as Roberta was over, and he had made it through without blowing his cover. As he walked inside, he couldn't help but smile thinking about the looks on his friends' faces when he told them he had succeeded. The next morning, Robert went through the whole process again. Wig, makeup, women's clothes. It was becoming almost routine, though the pantyhose still gave him trouble. As Roberta, he drove to work wondering what adventures the day would bring. Settling in at his desk, Roberta booted up her computer and checked the schedule. More meetings, more calls, more coffee runs. Linda swung by with an eager smile. "Morning, Roberta! Survived day one okay?" "It was busy, but I managed," Robert replied in his feminine voice. "You're a natural," Linda said. "I barely remember my first days here. Of course, that was 15 years ago." The phone rang before Linda could reminisce further. Roberta glanced at the caller ID. It was John from accounting. He was always demanding about his coffee order. With an internal sigh, Roberta rose to fetch John's triple espresso with 2 Splendas and soy milk. The day wore on in a blur of administrative tasks. Roberta felt like she was getting the hang of things. She answered calls seamlessly, juggled coffee orders, and took notes in shorthand. It was almost fun, becoming someone else for a while. During a short break, Roberta fixed herself a cup of tea. As she waited for the water to boil, Linda came into the break room. "There you are. I wanted to tell you the big news," Linda said. "The executives are having an office party this Friday. It's 60s themed, so time to break out your go-go boots." Roberta nearly spit out her tea. A costume party attended by all his employees and executives? This could get very awkward. But he tried to play it cool. "Oh, fun," Roberta said. "I don't really have anything 60s, though." "No problem," Linda replied. "A lot of us go shopping together beforehand to coordinate outfits. You should join." Before Robert could make an excuse, Linda was called away for a meeting. He sighed, realizing he was stuck going to this party if he wanted to maintain his charade. Maybe he could call in sick that day. The rest of the week flew by with paperwork and coffee. Roberta found herself getting more comfortable interacting with employees and handling the administrative workload. She even managed to avoid any more suspicious looks from Debbie in HR. By Thursday, Roberta felt like a pro secretary. She fielded calls, took notes, and fetched coffee orders without breaking a sweat. As she was refilling the copier paper, John from accounting walked by.
"Afternoon, Roberta,"
he said briskly, barely glancing at her.
"I need 300 copies of these expense reports by 5 p.m.
"You got it, Mr. Johnston," Roberta replied in her perky voice, keeping her head down. John paused and looked back at her curiously. For a second, Roberta worried she had slipped up, but then John shook his head and continued walking. Roberta breathed a sigh of relief. Her disguise was working flawlessly. Friday arrived, and Roberta reluctantly met Linda and a few other assistants to go party shopping. They ooh-ed and ah-ed over retro shift dresses and go-go boots. Roberta pretended to be interested for their sake, but was dreading wearing such a flashy costume. The outfit was straight out of Laugh-In, a pink and orange paisley shift dress, white knee-high boots, and a ton of gaudy plastic jewelry. Looking in the mirror, Roberta had to laugh at how ridiculous she appeared. At the party, Roberta tried her best to blend into the crowd and not draw attention, but it was hard to go unnoticed in such a loud outfit. She got several compliments and had to force herself to smile and say thanks in her feminine voice. Mercifully, people were too distracted by the drinks and music to pay Roberta much notice. She hovered near the snack table, nibbling crackers and observing the crowd. Everyone seemed to be having fun, and no one appeared to see through her disguise. "Girl, your dress is gorgeous," Linda squealed, appearing next to Roberta. "The colors are so mod." "Oh, thanks," Roberta replied. "Yours is so cute, too." Linda was rocking a baby doll dress and white knee-high boots. "Come on, let's dance," Linda said, dragging Roberta towards the makeshift dance floor. Roberta had no choice but to sway and twirl awkwardly in time to the oldies music. Linda was laughing and chatting the whole time.
"You know, we never got that drink after work,"
she remarked. "What do you say we go out next Thursday, have a real girls' night?" The music drowned out Roberta's sudden coughing fit. Drinks with Linda after hours? That was way too risky, but Linda was looking at her eagerly, waiting for an answer. Sure. Sounds fun," Roberta said weakly. Maybe she could fake sickness at the last minute. "Yay, it's a date," Linda said, giving Roberta a quick hug. "This is gonna be so much fun." Linda launched into a story about the previous year's office party when the head of marketing had too much to drink and photocopied his face. Roberta nodded along, praying for the party to end. She needed to get out of these clothes and wash off this makeup. But she still had a full week ahead of her as Roberta. As she lay in bed that night, exhausted after scrubbing off the costume makeup, Robert wondered if he could make it that long. But the alternative, admitting defeat to his friends, was unthinkable. He would see this charade through to the end. Monday morning, Roberta selected a modest white pantsuit and, instead of a blonde, this time a brunette wig. Time to get back to business. She spent the day buried in paperwork, hoping Linda wouldn't bring up their upcoming girls' night. On Tuesday, Robert had a close call when the head of marketing came over to chat with Linda while Roberta was at her desk.
"Who's this?"
he asked, glancing at Roberta. Thinking fast, she extended her hand enthusiastically.
"Roberta, the new secretary. It's so nice to meet you, sir."
He smiled and shook her hand.
"Likewise. I'm terrible with names. Hope you'll forgive me if I forget."
Laughing, he walked away without a hint of suspicion. A week passed, and Roberta settled comfortably into her role. Co-workers greeted her by name in the halls and asked about her weekends. Roberta had crafted a fake background to share. She was recently divorced, had moved to the city for a fresh start, and was enjoying the job so far. Everyone bought it completely. By now, going to work as Roberta felt perfectly natural. Robert almost didn't mind the pantyhose and pumps. He took pride in handling the administrative tasks efficiently. In meetings, he bit his tongue to avoid jumping in with executive comments. The only thorn in Roberta's side was the upcoming girls' night out with Linda. She kept casually reminding Roberta about it, clearly looking forward to spending time together outside work. Roberta would just smile and nod, privately hoping a crisis at work would delay their plans. Thursday evening, as employees began heading home, Linda swung by Roberta's desk. "Ready for some fun? I thought we could try that new Mexican place down the street." Roberta took a deep breath and put on a smile. "That sounds great," she said, trying to match Linda's enthusiasm. Inside, her stomach was churning. Drinks after work with Linda could unravel everything. But she had committed to maintaining her cover identity. The two women walked down the block to the new Mexican restaurant Linda had mentioned. It had a lively, energetic vibe, with colorful decor and upbeat mariachi music playing. Linda requested a table on the patio so they could enjoy the warm evening air. "Their margaritas here are supposed to be amazing," she said as they looked over the menus. "We definitely have to try them." Roberta laughed nervously. "Maybe just one," she said. Hard liquor could make it harder to keep up her charade. A perky waitress came by and took their order. 2 margaritas, guacamole to start, and Roberta played it safe by ordering a chicken burrito. Linda went all out with enchiladas, tacos, and more drinks. As they waited for their food, Linda launched into workplace gossip. "So Debbie in HR is definitely having an affair with the new VP," she said in a conspiratorial tone. "I ran into them coming out of a hotel together last weekend." "No way!" Roberta gasped, genuinely surprised. He made a mental note to have a discreet word with the HR director. Office relationships were risky business. "I know, so scandalous," Linda chuckled. The drinks and guacamole arrived, and the gossip continued flowing along with the margaritas. Roberta felt herself relaxing, almost forgetting her fake identity. It was nice to bond with an employee outside of work for once. "So, what do you think of working here so far?" Linda asked. Roberta sipped her drink carefully before responding. "Oh, everyone's been very nice. It's a big change from my last job." "And what about Mr. Executive?" Linda said with a knowing grin. Roberta nearly choked. Did she somehow suspect? But then Linda continued. "Our esteemed CEO, Robert, I swear that man lives and breathes work." Roberta laughed, relieved. "I haven't seen much of him." She tried to sound casual. "Count yourself lucky." Linda leaned in like she was divulging a secret. "He seems brilliant, but he's got no life outside the office. His poor wife, though. She's so sweet, but he never makes time for her." Roberta raised her eyebrows, surprised to hear this perspective on his marriage. He made a mental note to plan a weekend getaway with his wife soon. Their food arrived, providing a welcome break in the Robert gossip. As they ate, the conversation moved on to lighter topics like movies, books, and weekend plans. Roberta found herself really enjoying Linda's company. She had a lively sense of humor and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her new coworker. After finishing their meals, Linda insisted they order another round of margaritas. "It's ladies' night out," she declared. "We have to enjoy ourselves." Roberta didn't have the heart to say no. The drinks gave her a pleasant buzz that made it easy to get into the role of carefree gal pal. The mariachi band started up again, playing a fast-paced song. Linda gasped excitedly. "We have to dance to this!" Before Roberta could protest, Linda had grabbed her hand and pulled her up towards an open space near the band. Roberta gave in and let loose, twirling and stepping in time to the music. Linda hooted and cheered her on. "Shake it, girl!" Other restaurant patrons stopped to watch the impromptu dance party, clapping along. Linda spun Roberta around so fast she nearly lost her balance. They collapsed back at their table, laughing and out of breath. "Now that was fun," Linda said. We have to do this more often." Roberta laughed and agreed. She couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed an evening out so much. For a little while, she'd forgotten she was supposed to be playing a role, but as the night wore on, the margaritas started to muddle Roberta's thoughts. She had to focus to keep her voice at the right pitch and remember details of her fictional backstory whenever Linda asked a question, and she still needed to drive home and get out of these clothes. Noticing Roberta stifling a yawn, Linda insisted on getting the check. "We'd better call it a night before we fall asleep right here at the table." She overruled Roberta's offer to chip in and paid for the entire meal and drinks. "Seriously, Linda, thank you. That was so much fun," Roberta said as they headed out to the parking lot. Impulsively, she gave the other woman a quick hug. Linda squeezed her back. "Girls' night success," she said happily. "Now get home and get some beauty rest. See you tomorrow, Roberta." Roberta waved goodbye as Linda got in her car. Once she was out of sight, Robert breathed a huge sigh of relief. He'd made it through the evening without slipping up. Eager to get home and wash off this makeup, he drove carefully, following all the traffic laws. Pulling into his driveway, Robert could hardly wait to get inside and back to normal. But as he approached his front door, it swung open, and there stood his wife. "Oh!" Roberta exclaimed in surprise. His wife's eyes widened. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Roberta felt her buzz fading, replaced by cold panic. This wasn't how he had wanted his wife to find out. "Sweetie, I can explain," he started weakly. But before he could stammer out an excuse, his wife burst out laughing. "Robert, the look on your face!" she gasped between giggles. "Don't worry, Linda already texted me about your little bet." Robert felt his knees go weak with relief. Of course Linda was in on the prank. It had all been an elaborate joke coordinated with his co-workers to mess with him. He started laughing, too. "I cannot believe you all fooled me so well," Robert admitted, finally dropping the feminine voice. "I really thought I was blending in." His wife smirked, eyes twinkling. "You actually made a pretty convincing secretary. But a girls' night out with Linda? That was just cruel." They both laughed again. Robert gave his wife a kiss, feeling like the luckiest man alive. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.